All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. Thanks for joining us this evening, everyone. My name is Jamie Gelman. I am the Hylas sales director here at David Walters Yachts, and joining me tonight is Eric Holland, another one of our brokers, and the Italia sales director here at David Walters Yachts. We're going to cover a pretty wide range of items here this evening, focusing on the sales process and what the current marketplace is specifically for Hylas brokerage yachts. As many of you already know, David Walters is the exclusive dealer for new Hylas here in North America. And over the course of the last 10 years or so, David Walters has represented a pretty strong majority of the brokerage Hylases sold in North America and other spots in the world. It's been one of our primary focuses, and we have a pretty good understanding of what the market for Hylas is currently in the United States. So appreciate you guys all joining us tonight. The chat function again should be open to all you guys. If any point during the conversation that we're having, you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and drop them in the chat. And if it's relevant to what we're talking about at the moment, we'll try to get to it quickly. If not, we'll have a Q&A session at the end here. And I see Charles and Gretchen, you guys have hopped on, and you're got Hylas 54 number 30. That's great. Anybody else that's a Hylas owner and that's joined us, if you guys want to just let us know which boat you have in the chat, that would be great. And again, any questions we will try to get to as quickly as possible here. I'll let Eric go ahead and introduce himself here, and we'll get started.
Hey everyone, Eric Holland here. Been a broker here with David Walters Yachts for 5 years now. I've been a broker in total for about 10 years. Since my time with David Walters Yachts and beforehand, I've sold a great number of brokerage Hylases of every model, and great to be here with all of you and to tell you about the market and what's going on out there, because obviously it's a very fluid situation, and there's a lot of interest out there, a lot of excitement. So here we go.
Awesome. Well, I think the kind of we'll start it off here. We'll chat a little bit about sort of what the general market trends are right now in brokerage sailboats. Obviously, everybody remembers the last couple of years due to COVID. It's been sort of the wild, wild west, where there are boats sold without ever going to listing, over asking price, multiple offers, boats being sold without ever being seen, no contingencies. But even prior to COVID, 2018, 2019, boat sales were, and especially in well-maintained brokerage blue water boats, and especially with Hylas, sales were on the rise. Prices were steady, and the boats were getting money that was indicative of the quality of boats that Hylas has always produced. And now, coming out of COVID, we are still seeing a situation where there is not much inventory available in the marketplace, and buyers certainly still outnumber sellers. It's not the same deal where people are offering crazy amounts of money and buying boats sight unseen. But the Hylas market currently, there is almost no brokerage inventory in the United States currently, and boats that do become available are still selling prior to going to listing pretty regularly. There's not a whole lot of sold boat data available to us on the MLS currently, mostly because, especially here at David Walters, the vast majority of the Hylas brokerage boats that become available are sold without ever going to the MLS. So a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight is firsthand knowledge that we have just from dealing with as much Hylas brokerage as we do here. And we will, at the end, by the end of the day tomorrow, we'll send you a sort of spreadsheet of recently sold boats, the amount of days that those boats have been listed for, and comparison of listing price to sold price. So that all that data will get sent to you guys tomorrow. So don't worry about taking copious notes as we chat this evening. So that's kind of where the current marketplace is. Eric.
Yeah, to add on to what Jamie said there, he's 100% correct that the market is very strong for Hylas brokerage, and it's attributed to several factors. One of which is the boats were built of high quality, and throughout the years, the quality has typically been maintained very well by a lot of the owners out there. And compared to several other brands out there, just the quality of the materials being used is better, and they're aging better as they get older. You can compare to some other brands of similar year ranges, and they're literally starting to fall apart. Where the Hylases are, are just staying in a really good quality for brokerage. And at the same time, we're built in significant enough numbers that it's a very viable brand for someone looking to upgrade from a production boat into something more semi-custom at a price point that's attainable. That's for a lot of these boats is under $1 million or just above up to 1.5 million for one of the last Hylas 70s made. The location is also a huge factor with being around a lot of the blue water boating mecca. Most of these boats are on the East Coast of the United States, and they're very sought after in that regard. And to draft these boats for most of them makes them easy to use in a lot of areas of the East Coast and the Bahamas, Caribbean, those areas. So you're going to continue to see that these boats are going to hold their value for a significantly long time, especially as most of them are starting to reach their 20-year age and even older. A lot of these boats are now going through major refit cycles, new rigging, new sails, new engines, new electronics, the whole list, and modernizing them for the current world out there technology-wise, especially in the past couple of years as a lot of these boats have sold and they've been upgraded with a lot of the newer communications like Starlink and that kind of thing. So like I said, the market is very strong. That's why these boats continue to sell very quickly. Having the support of the brand and ourselves at David Walters Yachts has also been extremely influential behind that. And we continue to drive sales and drive people towards these boats. There's not really a lot of other brands out there that can say that. A lot of brands that may have been of this age have kind of forgotten about these boats, or they've gone out of business or changed ownership for dealers throughout the years. So there's not so much pushing behind it anymore. So having a brand that is in business with the support of the dealer and the service network and knowledge out there will also continue to keep the resale prices high. And based on the percentage compared to other brands out there, you'll see that other brands typically drop off much faster in resale value as they age.
And just to add to that, I think one of the big factors that's driving the current Hylas brokerage market right now is the change in philosophy on the new boat program coming out of Hylas right now, and that of the about 650 or so Hylases that have been built over the course of the last 40 years, probably 600 of those boats originally sold for under $1 million. And the current new boat marketplace, it's nearly impossible to build a blue water cruising sailboat for less than about $1.5 million. So your traditional kind of Hylas clientele is looking for a well-maintained boat that is somewhere south of $1 million, or right at that $1 million mark. So that ability to be able to purchase a very reputable, very dependable, well-built product that's going to continue to last for another 15, 20 years really drives the strength of the Hylas brokerage market.
And to add on to what Jamie said there, it's not just Hylas, who's kind of changed the tack of their boats. So has everyone else out there. They're taking on all the hallmarks of the technology that has now come out, and you have all these brands, Oyster, Swan, Baltic, Beneteau, Jeanneau, Hansa. All those brands are now loading their boats with technology and other systems That to a lot of cruisers, they may not need all those things, but they are the buzzwords, and everyone always wants to buy the newest technology on a new boat. And all those items do very much strongly increase the buying price of those boats, just because they're just loaded with all these technological items. So you're going to see that, these Hylases that, even though they may not have, motorized, lifting bars that come out of the settees down below and that kind of thing you see at the boat shows, they typically don't last too long offshore pounding through waves. These boats were built well with a saw glass hulls, for instance. The hardware, installed into solid fiberglass or extra reinforcement made in stressed areas. You don't see boats built like that anymore. Most boats are now built with a cord hull. And a lot of that to save on cost, and weight and fuel and having to buy smaller engines and smaller generators and all that sort of stuff. So the capabilities of these boats are going to be renowned for some time. It's kind of like maybe you were looking at boats 15, 20 years ago, and the hot ticket item may have been a Tiana 37 or a Valiant, same kind of thing, built very strongly, but a little bit older tech. Those boats held very high resale values for a very, very long time. And the Hylases are now doing the same thing.
Yep. One of the things that we are seeing right now, obviously, we talked briefly that the COVID Wild West days are kind of over, and boats are starting to take not longer to sell, but the process is definitely not what it was, where we were closing deals inside of a week to 2 weeks, as soon as an owner decided to sell. So, the process, instead of taking a week or two, is taking 30 to 45 days now. And part of that is, buyers today are definitely becoming more educated. Most of these buyers, especially those that are looking to buy a Hylas brokerage boat specifically, have done their research. They know what they're looking for. They know what the brand is, and they know exactly what boat they want. So they know the differences between the boats. They know that, there's only 854s in the world that have a centerboard. And if they're looking for one of those, they know that that's what they're looking for. They know if they want a late model 46, what they're in for. So our buyers are definitely more educated. They're willing to wait a little bit for that boat to arrive. But that being said, we have a list here of interested buyers that is lengthy, and there is certainly a buyer out there right now for 95% of the Hylases that have been built in would potentially be available in the US right now. So right now, generally, if you look at the Hylases that are available in the US, there's not really much on the East Coast at the moment, and that kind of goes into talking about location of your boat when you're thinking about listing it. Most of the listings you see currently available on the MLS today are on the West Coast, which traditionally has not been as big of a hotbed of blue water cruising sailboats, and those boats tend to take a little bit longer to sell on the West Coast or in the Great Lakes. As opposed to a boat that's in Fort Lauderdale or South Florida, somewhere in the Mid-Atlantic, Annapolis area, or up in New England in the Newport area. Those three areas kind of constitute the hotbed of blue water cruising, and specifically Hylas. It's no mistake that David Walters has an office in each one of those locations. So it definitely makes it easier when you're listing your boat to get it in front of a far greater number of people if it's in one of those places. So
yeah, location is it's one of the 4 points of selling a boat. The other ones being price, condition, and marketing. And it's the same thing over and over again. buyers want to be able to buy a boat in the right place at the right time. The last two Hylases I sold were both 54s. One of them was Blue Water. It was a 2003, and it was down in St. Thomas. St. Thomas has been a very good spot in order to sell boats because it's a U.S. territory. There's a haul out point there that's easy to get to, and you're nearby a lot of services, rigging, engine work, that kind of thing. The one before that was Patriot, was one of the last ones built in 2009. It was in St. Petersburg. I actually had it sold about an hour after I talked to the seller. I called someone who had been interested in Rover, the 2006 I sold in December, and that boat had sold before you can get to it. And we went down and did the survey 3 weeks later. So location does matter for sure. It's got to be in a good area at the right time of year. It's hard to sell a Hylas in Newport in the middle of winter kind of thing. But you know, locations just it definitely drives a lot of sales. It drives the resale value and ties and everything else. And Bill, yeah, for sure, you know, in Puerto Rico, it's definitely a good spot to sell boat. It's easy to get in San Juan from South Florida or a lot of other areas on the East Coast. It's definitely possible to do that down there, but it is going to be seasonally dependent for sure. Hurricane season is not going to be a good time to go down there and do anything. If it's in Grenada, it's a little bit different. But the problem is you got to be able to have the new owner get insurance, and it's going to be difficult if it's in one of those zones. A lot of times we found that in order to buy a boat like this during hurricane season, we have to move it out of that area before we can get a binder on it. So, but if it's with, you know, outside hurricane season during the winter months, yeah, sure. It's a pretty quick deal.
Yeah, and that's another factor into why it's been taking a little bit longer to close some of these deals, is that while the COVID boat boom was awesome, it has raised the red flags and insurance companies in a pretty significant way, and is certainly becoming more difficult for first time or less experienced blue water boat purchasers to obtain easy, massive, all-encompassing insurance policies. We are seeing insurance companies wanting to see pretty lengthy sailing backgrounds and resumes and certifications, and if not, are requiring some captain training, and definitely are becoming leery of boats being in the kind of red zone for hurricanes during hurricane season. Josh sold a boat in the Gulf Coast last year during hurricane season, and the insurance company would not let that boat close until it was north of Hatteras. So they actually, or sorry, north of Florida. So they actually had to hire a captain and sail that boat all the way from Texas to Georgia in order to make that closing happen. Mm-hmm. So it's just one thing to think about when you are considering listing the boat, is where you're going to want to have it and what time of year you're thinking about listing it. And another factor, obviously, interest rates and financing right now. Obviously, free money is kind of a thing of the past at this point. So interest rates have gone up pretty considerably. Here at David Walters, we're pretty lucky to work with a couple of very good financing companies that work very closely with us and have a number of different options for people. Quite honestly, most of the people that are buying these Hylases, this is sort of their dream boat, and most of them are at a station in their life where they're paying cash. Mm-hmm. So very few of the Hylas brokerage boats that we represent go down the financing route. But you know, it's sort of beholden to us as brokers to bring you guys qualified clients, and not show the boat to anybody that calls up and says, hey, I want to see this boat. But you know, we do our research on buyers as much as anything else, and it works better for everybody involved if we bring you one or two people that's very interested and very qualified to purchase your boat, instead of having a parade of people coming on and off the boat who are dreamers or not fully ready to purchase. And again, we're seeing that from the buyers these days that are prepared. They've talked to an insurance agent, they know what the drill is, and they've either got their financing set up or they have cash ready to go. So
Yeah, it has been an uphill battle with both the insurance companies and lenders. Most of the issues that come up have have a lot of times been when there's been a separate buyer's broker involved on these boats, where they where some other brokerage has brought a buyer to these boats. We help them out, but they're not educated on the fact that there's insurance and financing needs on their person, and as well as the boat's condition, which is another thing. We've had, as these boats get older, you do a survey, and a boat may not have been surveyed in a very long time, coming down to it, and there's some hidden defect found that is a deal stopper for a lender or an insurance company or both. That's happened many times, and it can be a shocker for sure, for a seller and everyone else involved. And it's a big reason why we do the due diligence when we list these boats, to really go through them with the owner, to sort things out and give recommendations, because it's one of those things it's one of those things of we kind of seen it all, because we have, and usually we'll see something, have a recommendation that's, but hey, this really needs to be taken care of before you get the boat listed. And we also have a checklist to go through with the sellers. It's pretty involved, but it goes through a lot of the stuff that the surveyors are going to look for, and you may find things you didn't even know about, that could be years old, but when they find it and they come up, it can for sure be a deal stopper. And if there's insurance or a lender involved, it may be a cold stop. So it's very important to really just make sure that these boats that are very expensive boats and have a lot of systems, that we check everything in due course for sure. And then Bill, you had other question. Is there a difference in pricing between selling in March of 24 versus South Florida? Really, there's not going to be much of a difference in pricing. A lot, like when I sold Blue Water in March of this year in St. Thomas, that buyer actually came from San Francisco and started using the boat right away. And they're down in Grenada now. The boat's wintering down there, where it's wintered in Trinidad or Grenada for most of its life. So they're kind of just following the same routine there. But that's just their specific situation. At the same time, if someone wanted to say, okay, I want to bring the boat up in March and bring it into Florida, well, that's an easy 3-day delivery right there. Or if they want to bring it further north, well, the Gulf Stream's right there, just hop on the train and go north. So there's really not going to be much of a price difference. It's really going to come down to the quality of the boat. It's not like it's a Lagoon 45 and there may be 20 on the market, and then you're really fighting an uphill battle. That's going to be really like, you got to get right next to the largest international airport you could find that has a lot of people coming in and out, like in Fort Lauderdale, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, there's really, the marketplace is a little funky right now. The late model cruising catamaran market is flooded at the moment. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those boats available. And that was kind of the hot ticket. COVID, we're going to buy into these fractional programs, or have instant charter income available. It was kind of an easy first step into the market for a lot of people. And I think the ones that have decided they liked it are looking into getting out from underneath that sort of fractional ownership or charter income situation, and are dumping those boats. And then there's a segment that just decided it wasn't for their family, or they've moved on to something else. So that market is currently flooded. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we look at the Hylas brokerage market, and there is almost zero inventory available. The last two 54s, Espadon, which is a 2008 54, was on the market for, I believe, 20 days in South Florida, in the Fort Lauderdale area, and that boat is under contract for over $675,000. And then Tupelo Honey, which is a rare 54 centerboard boat that was in 08, I believe, as well. That sold here in Maryland in less than 24 hours. So just to give you an idea of what's out there right now.
Mhm.
So currently there are no 56s on the market. I don't believe I think we have 146 that's about to come on the market,
Mhm.
but they're finishing up doing some maintenance and work on that boat before the listing goes live. But I know that we've got 3 or 4 clients that are going to be chomping at the bit to put offers in on that boat as soon as we get the thumbs up from the listing broker
Mhm.
out on the West Coast that that boat is going live. So I would not imagine that that boat's going to last very long.
Mhm.
Other than that, there's on the East Coast right now, there's 2 Hylas 70s, which are the last 2 Hylas 70s built, Independence and Ragnar, which is the formerly
Industry.
Innisfree.
Mhm.
So Innisfree is now up in Newport and listed at 1.7, and Independence is down in Fort Lauderdale. It's listed at 139. So other than that, everything else that's listed right now is older, not very well maintained, and generally overpriced. They're brokers that are not as knowledgeable on Hylas as we are,
Mhm.
and they can see the MLS and they can see what other Hylases have sold for, but they haven't seen those boats and they don't know what condition they're in. So I guess it's a good time to kind of roll into talking about condition of your boat and kind of a couple things that are definitely going to make a difference when you're putting your boat up for sale. We talked a little bit about insurance and financing companies looking at, certain big ticket items when going through the closing and sale process. Generally, most insurance companies right now want to see standing rigging that's less than 10 years old. So if you're coming up on that, that's worth looking into doing a replacement on. Having, if you're close to 1,000-hour service interval on the engine, going ahead and doing that makes a big difference. Doing your teak decks, if you have teak decks, makes a huge difference. Certainly in the way that the boat shows. If not doing necessarily a complete bottom job, but putting a fresh coat of bottom paint on makes a big difference. New filters, checking through hauls, all that sort of kind of general maintenance, going through the boat from tip to tail and making sure that it shows as new as possible or as well as possible, makes a big difference. And the better condition your boat is, the easier, the faster it's going to sell, and it more likely that it's going to demand top dollar in the marketplace.
There's there's been a strong trend in the Hylases on the brokerage market, with buyers and with picking out the right boat and leading to a quick, successful, and good price on the sale, is that in general, good repair and general good cosmetic condition overall, it's been fine. Doesn't have to be perfect, but if it's in good condition, average overall, it's led to a quick sale and a good premium price and that kind of thing. I've seen a lot of boats out there that tend to, in the effort to sell the boat, kind of put the lipstick on the pig kind of thing. Like they do a paint job at the hull, but the sails are 15 years old, the air conditioning doesn't work, and the engine's got 6,000 hours on it. Stuff like that. They go for the blink factor to get people there, but everything else is kind of left by the wayside. So going through your boat and saying, hey, these things, they don't need to be new, but they need to be in good working order. Is definitely paramount. Like if you need new sails and you're planning to hang on to the boat for a couple more years, buy that new set of sails, use it for 2 years, and sell the boat with 2-year-old sails. You might as well go ahead and do that now and have the fun with the new set of rags than waiting to the last minute, and then you have complete depleted sails, and people are just like, well, I don't want the boat, because the first thing I gotta do is spend a ton of money on sails. It's the same thing with the higher engine hours out there. If you've got an engine that's got 6,000 hours on it and you're not going to sell for a couple of years, go ahead and rebuild it or replace it, use it for 1,000 hours, and then sell the boat.
And I
you
don't,
get money out of it.
and I don't think hours or putting hours on a diesel engine is not the worst thing in the world. I mean,
Mhm.
we've sold Hylases with 8, 9, 10,000 hours on the engine, and those engines can be immaculate. If you're the kind of person that is doing your regular maintenance on those engines and your engine room is clean and you can show a potential buyer a history of having maintained that engine properly, the number of hours is sort of irrelevant on it, but 6,000 or 8,000 hours on an engine that you can show a binder or a spreadsheet of doing maintenance on it every 200, 250 hours, doing the 1,000-hour services on, you've got all the receipts, you can show that you've cared for that and you have a clean and tidy engine room. That engine's going to probably run for another 4,000 or 5,000 hours without too much of a problem. Whereas you could have an engine with 3,000 or 4,000 hours on somebody that hasn't kept meticulous records. It's a little dingy in their engine room, and that's gonna turn a buyer off more than the number of hours in a pristine engine room that with documented service. So
Sure, exactly.
yeah, Charles, as far as electronics go, if you've got the original electronics on a 10 or 15-year-old boat, doing some sort of basic upgrade is definitely going to make a difference. Something that's NEMA 2K compliant, that sort of thing, will make a difference. In general, no matter what you're doing to upgrade your boat, you're never going to get 100% back in that. Generally, it's kind of in the 30 to 50% range is what you can expect. So if you spend $10,000 on new electronics for your boat and then sell it, 12 to 18 months later, you can expect about a $3,000 to $5,000 return on that. So, but again, if you're going to continue using the boat, having new electronics is going to be great. It's going to make life easier, and it will certainly make your boat stand out amongst other boats in the marketplace. But is it going to make or break the deal? Not necessarily. And again, a lot of these people that are buying these boats are going to take that boat, and there is going to be an expectation that they're going to have to do some stuff to it. And electronics turns out to be a pretty personal kind of choice to a lot of people.
Yes.
What I might find super easy and intuitive to use and what I prefer on a boat might be different than what Eric prefers or what you prefer. So doing a kind of basic upgrade of displays and that sort of thing just to kind of clean it up and make sure everything's working properly is never a bad idea, but not the most necessary thing in the world.
Charles, a good rule of thumb is within the previous 2 generations of electronics manufacturers equipment will get you in the right ballpark. If you're 6 or 7 generations behind, then it's definitely time for to do that before the boat gets sold, or at least, like Jamie said, at a basic level, displays, the radar, but maybe leave all the sensors if they're still compatible or reverse compatible.
Sure.
If they're still a good working order, because no one's really going to tell the difference anyways. But it's better to see. You don't want to see a RL70 display from 2002 versus maybe a 2018 touchscreen by Raymarine. So big difference there.
Yep. Some more stuff on condition. Dinghies is kind of one that everybody sort of overlooks a little bit. Everybody loves their dinghy, and it kind of, it has its own little personal touch to your boat.
It's a family car.
It is the family car. If you do not have any documentation for your dinghy, so bill of sale, MSO, title, registration, any of that stuff, if you've been flying under the radar in the Caribbean or moving a boat around and you never really paid to register that dinghy, sell it to the kids down the block, give it away, put it on Craigslist, do something with it.
Get rid of it, sink it.
But you would be amazed at the number of times that dinghy paperwork has delayed closings and things of that nature. Because we are ultimately responsible for everything that's included with the sale, we have to provide some sort of dinghy documentation when we're closing boat sales. So again, if you don't have documentation for that stuff, sell it on Craigslist or sell it to the kids down the block or do whatever you can with it. But it's not going to help selling the boat if there's no documentation. And then in the same vein, if it's older, if it's got some mold and that sort of thing in the tubes and they're a little leakier, they're not holding air, and the outboard is finicky to start and things like that, sell it to the kids down the block, put it on Craigslist, get what you can for it. Most new owners are going to buy their own new dinghy anyway, unless you have something that's like 2 or 3 years old and in pristine condition. And if you are going to sell it with the boat, take the time to clean it, pull the covers off, pull the chaps off, do the right maintenance to the tubes, make sure the tubes are holding air, make sure there's clean gas in the fuel tank, make sure the dinghy engine starts well. It's one of those kind of overlooked things in the selling process, but having a ugly, torn up, half deflated dinghy with an engine that won't start hanging off the back of your boat when you're trying to sell it isn't the best look in the world.
Yeah, guys, it's kind of been the bane of our office administrator's existence. Whenever we mention there's a dinghy involved, there's a cringe and a cross-eyed look, and it's about where's the paperwork. So not a lot of people think about it this way, but the dinghy is another registered vessel, just like your yacht is, and it's no different in the eyes of the authorities. It's the same exact thing. So even though whenever you buy a dinghy, you're going to get that manufacturer statement of origin, even though you might not think about it, and you might stuff it in some drawer somewhere and forget about it for the next 5 or 6 years. If you don't register a dinghy, keep that MSO and a copy of the invoice where you bought the dinghy right next to the Coast Guard document for your boat. And I'm not kidding about that.
Yeah.
That'd be the best thing you could do to help everyone out, or do what Jamie said, get rid of it.
Get rid of it. That's right. And to answer your question, thank you for making your boat a proper sailboat and getting rid of your in-mast furling.
I like
was going to say that first of all. I don't think it's going to have an effect on the price either way. It's going to be a different buyer. So like we said, and have been saying, the buyers that are coming to Hylas now are going to be very well educated. They've looked at Hylas, they know what they're looking for. And I can tell you that there's a couple buyers out there that we've spoken to that would love to have a Furlex boom or a stack pack, as opposed to an in-mast roller furling main.
100%.
So that buyer is out there, and quite honestly, that buyer may be willing to pay a premium to have that, because it's something that they don't have to change on their own when they get the boat. So I don't think that's a negative either way. It just is a distinguishing characteristic on your boat, which isn't good or bad. So just different. And Charles, as far as painting the hull, it's really going to be, you're never going to get the full paint price. You're never going to get full price that you pay to paint your hull.
That's where you take you to get it painted.
That's right. If you're in Grenada, you might, but
Did the Hinkley enforcement?
No. If it's in really bad shape and it's oxidized and you can't, if it's a dark color and it's not going to buff and polish and wax itself out, it's going to help sell the boat.
Sure.
And you're going to be able to get the premium price for it. But again, like we said, it's a combination of everything. So in addition to, there's a very fine line that you're going to walk when you're thinking about doing major refit type stuff prior to selling your boat. So my wife, who's a broker right now, has a client that's trying to sell a 2004 Beneteau 423, which obviously is not relevant to the Hylas discussion, other than that they have just spent $75,000 over the last 18 months, putting brand new sails, brand new electronics, doing a bunch of interior work to the boat. The boat looks great, and they failed to do the bottom job, and they just had somebody walk away after from a full price offer because there were rust spots and things poking through on the keel. And these guys had spent so much money that they didn't want to pay for a quick bottom job. And so they lost out on a full price offer because they didn't want to do a quick bottom job on it after spending all this money on new sales and everything. And so if you're going to start down that full refit project, you can't really do it halfway.
You can't.
So, And if you're going to go down that full refit project, do you really want to sell the boat, or do you want to keep using the boat?
Mhm.
So I think if you're thinking about hanging on to the boat for the next 2 or 3 years and doing that kind of refit stuff is going to make using the boat more enjoyable for you, then do it. And it's certainly not going to make the boat sell for less at the end. But it's not, if you paint the boat and it costs you $35,000 to paint the boat, don't expect your boat to sell for $35,000 more than it would have without the paint job.
Yeah.
So,
And that's exactly, it goes back to what I said before about having the boat in good general order.
if you paint the boat and your teak decks look like trash,
Mhm.
then painting the hull didn't do any good.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna paint the hull, then you gotta do your varnish and you gotta do the teak decks and that sort of thing. Now, doing all of that is going to add a significant amount of value to your boat.
Mhm.
It's gonna reduce the number of days that boat sits on the market, and it is going to demand a premium price. And the more days your boat spends on the market, that's increased carrying costs, whether that's in the water or out of the water. I know here in Maryland, we recommend most of the boats that we have listed up here, we put on the Heart at Jabins. And that runs about $700 a month for a premium yard spot at Jabins up here. And down in Fort Lauderdale, and this is another good nugget of information for you guys that are thinking about listing your boats. We do maintain a couple of slips that David Walters owns at Harbortown Marina that we offer to our brokerage clients at a pretty significantly reduced price. So if you are thinking about listing, we do have the ability to get your boat into a very nice protected marina where there's a David Walters employee and a Hylas employee looking at that boat every single day. So
it's and it brings up a good point for what Jamie was going on there. When it comes to selling your boat, a good portion of the Hylas owners are either living aboard at the time or they're just recently moving off the boat. This is something that's been kind of common, is that like for example, Blue Water down in St. Thomas, Ray was living aboard the boat throughout the sales process, but the boat looked like it was ready for a boat show. Everything was put away nicely. It was ready to be inspected at pretty much all times. And so there's definitely going to come a point throughout the sales process, for instance, where he had known he was ready to sell the boat. He had already offloaded a significant amount of his personal gear and sent it back to Florida. So when it comes to that time, we're going to also help you out there and come with the advice of, hey, if you're still actively using the boat, completely understand, but also need to be aware, hey, the boat is for sale, and island hopping from island to island, where there may not be contact with an airport easy to get to or something like that, is definitely a detriment to the sales process. So it's kind of just getting in that mental focus of, hey, okay, it's time to sell. It's time to, put the boat in the right location to go and make sure she's in the right condition. And it's kind of like, yeah, it needs to be in that boat show condition, because first impressions, matter 100% of the time.
yeah. And guys, it's no different than selling your house. We have a 17-page checklist of items to go through that, if you guys decide to list your boat with us, we show up to do an initial evaluation of that boat. And this will kind of lead us into pricing and that sort of thing. But we show up to do an initial evaluation of your boat, and we start at the bow and we work through the entire boat. And we go through this entire checklist to go make sure that all the systems on board are working correctly. Things are clean. We don't miss little details that people are going to notice when they come and look at the boat. Things that you've learned to live with on your boat that a potential buyer is going to see as an issue, as instead of something that you guys have figured out 3 or 4 workarounds and it doesn't really bother you. things as simple as like gas struts. We all know that after 10 or 15 years, gas struts are gonna start to die a little bit on you. But just making sure that like gas struts are functioning, don't have rust on them, the little catch-alls around lazarettes and hatches are cleaned out. The Chapman's pilot book from 1983, you don't need to have that on the boat anymore. The 2005 one is probably sufficient to leave on the boat. So all those little things, and we're going to send you guys that list as well as the kind of market data in an email by the end of tomorrow, just so that you guys have that. So it's a really good thing just to kind of have in your back pocket. We don't, when we're listing the boat, we don't want it to go to survey. And as we're getting ready to leave the dock for a sea trial, find out the batteries aren't charged, or the furling unit in the mast is not functioning correctly because the sail's 15 years old. Like, these are all things that, yes, you want your boat to be cleaned out, as clean as possible, show as best as possible. But at the same time, you want to know that everything's functioning on the boat. And that means, you want to take a boat out and use it before we go to survey and that sort of thing. So it's running that engine at full throttle. Most of us don't like running our engines at wide open throttle for a long period of time, but I can tell you that the surveyor is going to go out and they are going to run the engine at wide open throttle for a number of minutes to make sure that under load it's not overheating and that the thermostat's working and water is coming out and the impeller is functioning. And that's not something that we want to find out at survey. That's something we want to find out before. So doing those kind of tests and that sort of thing go a long way to preparing the boat. And once we get the boat under contract and go to a survey and sea trial, we want to minimize the number of surprises that we have during that process. So it shortens the length of closing and that sort of thing. And it means that once we've negotiated a price and we've got the boat under contract, we'd like the boat to be accepted at that price and quickly close everything. It's in the best interest of you guys more than anything else to have that process wrap up as quickly as possible. So
it's exactly right. When it comes time, in my personal method of doing things for listing a boat, I'll meet with the client and spend the whole day on the boat. And they'll show me the systems, they'll show me everything on the boat. And, typically we may or may not run everything, but we'll definitely take a close look at stuff. But it comes when it's time, especially, to do the survey. I've obviously coached the seller on, prep work and test equipment, that kind of thing. But I'll always arrive a day before the survey and sea trial at least to run everything myself. And sometimes we'll go out for motor, go out for a sail, just to run everything and kind of just get a lot of the unknowns answered now. And that still gives me a few hours, like to get on the phone. Hey, I need someone down here now, or something I can take care of to eliminate before the survey, because little things do add up as well. If there's a lot of little things I can fix easily, hey, it's just one less thing to worry about during the sea trial. I could sit back and relax. Chris, you had a great question there. How does U.S. market compare to others internationally? It's definitely specifically for Hylas. The United States is where 95% of these boats were sold and are living. Obviously, a lot of people do circumnavigate their Hylases. And sometimes they end up in areas, especially during COVID, where they were kind of stuck, such as several boats in Australia and New Zealand, some boats in the Mediterranean and that kind of thing. It definitely lengthens the sales cycle significantly. There's, for example, a 2005 Hylas 54 that's been for sale on the North Island, New Zealand now for going on 4 years. It got stuck there during COVID and no one's been really interested in buying the boat. And the boat's been sitting there, I believe, unused since then on a mooring. So it's definitely one of those things where Epsilon, for instance, of 2008, she was put on a ship back to Fort Lauderdale specifically to be sold from New Zealand because of that 2005 that's over there sitting. We explained to the seller that, hey, the boat is been there for a while. It's been sitting. We highly recommend you. I know it's a large chunk of money, $65,000 to put it on a dockwise ship over to Fort Lauderdale. but the boat got sold in a month. So we know people love to go to these areas. I do as well. But it's definitely not a market for these boats to be sold in a quick time frame.
Yeah, vacationing there is different than purchasing a 54-foot sailboat and having to get back to where you're gonna go cruising primarily. So, doing a delivery on a Hylas 54 from New Zealand back to the East Coast of the United States can be a multi-year process.
Mhm.
So, it certainly is going to affect the timeline and the, sales price of the boat, having it not in one of these major, even in the United States, as I mentioned earlier. There are several boats for sale on the West Coast, and the Pacific Northwest that have sat. And some of that is just the difficulty of getting that boat to the primary cruising grounds
Mhm.
where these boats are used. And quite honestly, that's the East Coast of the United States and the Caribbean.
There was a 2014 Passport 545 named Savannah. You may have seen it listed. She was in Seattle. Then she was in San Francisco. Then she was in San Diego. And then we finally was able to convince the seller, hey, you need to get this boat over to Fort Lauderdale. And once it got to Fort Lauderdale, she was sold in 45 days. And the boat had been on the market for more than a year on the West Coast. So there is definitely a significant amount of buyers on the East Coast of the United States for these boats. The West Coast, people definitely love the area, but it's not the cruising grounds that a lot of people want to experience. And I understand a lot of people, they end up in some area, and for whatever reason or another, the boat ends up staying there, like in Panama or some other kind of. It's a common place, but it is very well far flung. But at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world to get the boat back to the United States. I understand if it's halfway around the world, that's a little bit different. But if it's down in like South America or somewhere else, which is kind of just a little bit out of reach, a lot of people, we have captains that we can send. Hey, go get the boat, bring it back, get it at least to Florida. It can be back in Florida within 2 weeks of giving the go word. So it definitely behooves people to say, hey, I know it's going to be expense, but at the end of the day, it's actually going to save you probably money because you're going to make it up by getting the boat into the hot ground.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
And sort of the one point that we haven't really touched on is marketing. And that's really kind of where David Walters, we're not going to plug David Walters too much, but this is where we are. This is where we kind of distinguish ourselves in the marketplace. Having a relationship with the builder that we do allows us to kind of market these boats a little bit differently. And the relationships that we built over the years with a number of photographers and videographers that are extremely well known in the yachting industry. Billy Black, Devin Conway from 410 Films allows us to do a number of different things that a lot of other places aren't. Hop on Yacht World and just take a look at a lot of the listings, and you will see everything from fully choreographed and staged photos where the boat's clean and fully professional photographs done properly lit, high definition, very, very clear, all the way down to thumbnail style photos that were taken by somebody on iPhone 10, I guess would be an old iPhone now. We couple that with doing full video walkthroughs of boats, the ability to do Matterport 360 tours where you can basically walk through the boat and click around and see the 360-degree views. All that is stuff that we offer to our clients, and it makes a difference in being able to sell boats faster. Again, we talked about buyers are significantly more educated now than they have ever been, and the ability for these buyers to get onto YouTube, to browse through the David Walters website and other listing websites makes a huge difference in them being knowledgeable about the boats and moving quickly and deciding quickly when they're looking to purchase.
Yeah, Ed, I just saw you drop off, so take care, Ed. Thank you for joining in.
Thanks, Ed.
But yeah, I mean, for sure, in the process of getting these boats sold, marketing wise, anyone with a camera can take a photo. The thing is having the experience to be able to know what you're taking a photo of and being able to explain that in the listing of what this does and why it's important to a Hylas, for example. I've seen a lot of listings out there by people where there's not enough photos. I've seen it when there's been too many photos. I've seen when there's been photos of things that really don't matter and they're missing all the important parts about the specific boat. You may have seen me on kind of a, I guess, YouTube personality, people call me, with the videos I've done on a lot of these boats. It's being able to point out the right things and the knowledge of these boats is why we're successful in selling them, because they are unique, and all these boats being semi-custom definitely lends to having the experience needed out there. If you're looking for the right job, definitely, gotta have the right person involved there. And when it comes down to, the marketing of the boats, obviously there's a graduating scale depending on the popularity. Selling a Hylas 70 is more difficult than selling a Hylas 46 because of the size and the price level. So there's definitely different marketing tactics that go into each model of boat out there, and trying to find the right buyer. And it definitely takes an expert to do all that.
One more thing to think about if you guys are thinking about selling. We know it's pretty popular in the Hylas group, and it's awesome for us is that a lot of you guys maintain cruising blogs and that sort of thing. And throughout cruising, we all know that little things go wrong with boats, and we all kind of have bad days on the water. And sometimes,
take care, Charles.
Thanks, Charles. Sometimes we like to vent on our blogs and that sort of thing. If you are thinking about putting your boat on the market, it may be a good idea to go through and scrub that blog a little bit. And if you had a bad day and your forward head decided to give up the ghost or something like that, and you cussed it out left, right, and center on your blog, maybe delete that post. I know Josh had a couple that were selling a 54, and they had a pretty extensive blog, and they had 3 or 4 blog posts over the course of 2 years where their forward head had given them a ton of trouble. And the buyer showed up to survey with those blog pages actually printed out and went, we got to double check the forward head and make sure all of this works, because clearly they've had some problems with it. So we talk about buyers being more and more educated, but they really are, and they're doing their research. And obviously it's a lot easier for them to gather a lot of information. So
I was actually I was just surveying a Alden 54, and gorgeous boat, beautiful boat. But one of the points in the listing was I had a new rudder several years ago, made of carbon fiber stock. It's like, okay, cool, new rudder, but why? Well, the buyers started Googling the boat's name out there and the history of the boat, and it turns out there was an article in Cruising World about in 2014 the boat had lost its rudder in a storm off Hatteras, had to be rescued by the Coast Guard. The owners at the time may have thought that was a cool article to write, but in the selling process of the boat, probably not the best marketing you would want. So definitely think about this. Kind of like the Instagram people out there with the cool photos of the sunsets and that kind of thing. Everyone loves the good stuff. The bad stuff, not so much.
For sure. Well, we're kind of coming up against the end of this year. Does anybody have anything that they want to ask us that we haven't covered? Chat is still open, so it's been great for you guys that you guys have been asking questions throughout. It makes our job a lot easier. So anybody have anything that we haven't covered yet? Any questions, comments? Go ahead and hop in there right now. We'll give you guys a second to type anything.
And of course, offline guys, feel free to contact us. Go to davidwaltersyachts.com. Jamie and I are both on there, our cell phones or emails.
I'm going to type our main email address in here and the main office phone number for you guys, just so you have it.
We're reachable day, night, holidays.
That's right.
Sort of. You might not get me between the hours of 4 and 7 on the holiday. Usually afterwards, I've been looking up enough, I'll pick up the phone.
Let's see if my computer wants to work or not.
Yeah, it's definitely been a little bit laggy on a few things. Oh, there it goes.
No, of course not. Of course, I missed one early on. So
yeah.
Anyway, we'll send you guys an email tomorrow. That's gonna have all of our contact info on it. So unfortunately, we're being a little laggy over here.
Yeah.
So, but thank you guys so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And again, if you have any questions at all, or just want to talk about your Hylas or what's going on with Hylas, Eric and I are always available, and it really is our passion in life to talk about yachts and specifically Hylas. So please feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email, and we're happy to chat anytime. So thanks so much, and we hope to see all you guys soon.
Take care, guys. Enjoy sailing.
Thank you.